Last month, the French National Commission announced that Google Analytics was declared illegal with respect to the European law on the protection of private data. Except that Google Analytics is the most used analytics tools in the world. It's 70% of the French market, and it's 75% of the world market. Yeah, that's what we call monopoly, my friends. If you manage your website or the one of your company, you're likely to ask yourself a lot of questions. So don't worry, we're going to review the main ones together. But first, let me clarify something. The French National Commission has issued a formal notice to Google, which means that the company has a limited period of time, which is exactly 1 month, to comply with the law before the sections fall. So either they need to host the data only in the European Union or to make the data transfer with the US compatible with the European laws. Well, because the data collected with the tool was actually sent to the US, and still is, by the way. And there's this strong risk that this data was actually used by the American intelligence services. And all this without your consent. Even when you click the little banner and you say, yes, I consent of the use of my data, there's written that your data is going to be used for advertising purposes, not by the American intelligence services. So this is why it was declared illegal. There's the IP addresses, your browser data, your website information, and unique online identifiers. So the big problem is to allow a single entity to hold that much information that could potentially help it identify yourself. This is what we call illegal. So you might say to me, but how come all this data on my visitors is actually sent to the US? First of all, you should know that when you use a free tool, well, you have to go along with the consequences. So that means there's a counterpart to this. And it goes with through the collection of your data, and by installing Google Analytics, you agree that your visitors' data will be collected and sent to the US for analysis purposes, of course. When you arrive on a site that uses Google Analytics, this is what happens. When you arrive on the website, the browser, your internet browser, is loading a list of elements within the code of the website. Within the code of this website, you have a little piece of code asking your browser to retrieve some information about you. It could be your IP addresses, information about your device, information about the size of your screen, and of course, all the information regarding the behavior that you had on the website. All that information is stored in a HTML cookie, so it's just a piece of text stored in your PC or Mac. And this information is also stored by the analytics tools, which is Google Analytics. And the thing is that this data is stored in a database which is called BigQuery. And BigQuery is storing the data either in European Union, but also transmitting this information to the US. That's why the French Commission has judged that the transfer of information between France and the United States is not sufficiently regulated. It's not compatible with the law of the European Union. So we have a massively used analytical tools that is sending all your data to the US to be used for maybe any purposes they want, and they don't collect your explicit content for that. But let's Let's go a little bit back in time on this matter, because there's nothing new on the topic except that the French National Commission finally decided to take an official stand on this matter. In fact, since the launch of the first version of the GDPR in May 2018, Google Analytics did not respect the rules. Companies knew this very well at that time. For example, the data it stored was in the US and not in Europe. I remember that I spent a lot of time debating with Google in the name of my client when I was working in an ad agency. But what can you do to fight against such a big American giant when you do not weigh heavily in the revenue? Come on. So when a tool occupies nearly 70% of the market share, well, it's just kind of difficult to weigh in. So for many years, Google had played the card of the good compliance with the GDPR. They benefited from a privacy shield that had been put in place since August 2016. So that means it was 2 years prior the launch of the GDPR. And it has been recognized by the European Commission as providing adequate protection to personal data transfer from the European entity to companies established in the United States. But it was not until July 2020 that this privacy shield was cancelled by the European Court of Justice. So they waited 2 years after the issue of the GDPR to finally decide to cancel this privacy shield, which was just not compliant with the GDPR. And I'm not going to say that everything was just black. Efforts were made by Google with the help of the companies to change things. So that means on the Google Analytics side, new features allowing more transparency on data collection and storage were launched. When the French National Commission officialized its formal notice on the subject, nothing is random. This follows the position taken by Austria at the beginning of 2022. And in fact, Germany is in the process of doing exactly the same thing, as well as Denmark and Norway. So we are finally starting to take a multi-countries position. This is, in my opinion, a political pressure game. It finally takes a significant dimension to force Google's hand. It remains to be seen who will win this arm wrestling match, and especially if the fight will be played out at the European level. Otherwise, French alone won't be able to face Google, that's for sure. The first option is simply to keep Google Analytics in place until Google complies with the law. So when the tools occupy such a prominent place on the market, you can imagine that the French Commission will have a pretty hard time putting all the sites that use it on notice. So I think this solution is probably the best for any company with a significant history and size. For example, if your company already has more than 2 years of data history with the volumes of visits above 5,000 visits per month, this is maybe the most logical actions to go with. But there's a second option. You can take this opportunity to switch to a GDPR-friendly analytics tool such as Matomo or Analytics Suite 2 from AT Internet, or even Fathom. And you can also market this to your consumers and prospects, an additional proof of your concern about the protection of their private data. So the second option, I think, is more interesting for recent businesses or new one because they have a low level of data history, so less to lose by switching to another analytics tool, or maybe you want to switch to a GDPR-friendly tool and market this to your consumers, so you have a better incentive to do this. The recent formal notice for the French Commission is therefore, for me, far from being really alarming as it is. We are essentially dealing with a political arm wrestling, a balance of power that is finally becoming official, clearer, after more than 4 years of immobility in France and in Europe, because since May 2018, no clear position has been given while everyone knew that Google was not playing by the rules. But Google announced, however, that the US and the European Union were actually exchanging for the implementation of a new protocol for international data transfer. So I think this story is to be continued. And in the meantime, you have the choice to either simply keep Google Analytics or to switch to a more GDPR-friendly one and to communicate about it to consumers.